Well, hello everybody. Thanks for joining us on our first webinar of a webinar series this week on the exciting new release of SolidWorks 2014. So we're going to go through a bunch of content today, but we're going to have a focus on parts and sketching. We do have a few other webinars this week as well. So just to quickly go through them, we have so parts and sketching today. Tomorrow we have assemblies and drawing. On Thursday we have the full SolidWorks solution, so some of the add-on products like simulation and PDM and documentation. And then on Friday, we have a focused webinar on SolidWorks Electrical. So in the room today is myself, Eric Van Essen, and next to me,
I'm Jake Middleton, and we'll be taking you through SolidWorks 2014.
Perfect. So before we get on to parts and sketching, we wanted to talk a little bit about what's new at Javelin, and we also wanted to do a few polls. So just to get to know our audience, I'm going to launch a quick poll right now. So we're just going to see what version of SolidWorks you're using today. So we're just curious on whether you're back a couple releases, whether you're up to the latest and greatest, or if you don't use SolidWorks. You know, we do have some customers out there that are just looking to learn about SolidWorks, of course. So if you can fill that in, would be great. We'll keep that open for a few more seconds. 5, 4. All right. Good. Well, it looks like we're at about 63% right now as SolidWorks 2013 or 14. Oh, it's up to 65, so that's pretty good. We got majority of people up on the latest and greatest stuff, or pretty close to it anyhow. And so happy that you're on board there, and you should get some good stuff out of you. So I'll close this up. Perfect. Okay, so just a few things I wanted to announce of what's new at Javelin. And just to make you guys aware as well, I'm not sure if anybody has attended the live meetings, but the content that we're doing in these webinars is the same content as the live meetings we did. For the most part, there's a couple things on Thursday we're switching out, and a couple things we don't have time for. But if you have attended those, you know, it is a repeat, but happy to have you join anyhow. So what's new at Javelin? So the first thing we wanted to make you aware of is the expansion that we did out west. We acquired a company called Automated Design System. They were based out of Winnipeg, and we opened up another office out in Edmonton and Surrey and Calgary. So part of that was part of that acquisition as well. So you know, what does that mean to you? Well, of course, it's a larger pool of experts. We have increased support coverage. And it does allow us to deliver solutions that are relevant for well, across the country that you can take advantage of. So we took on products like Aras EPLM. We took on well, we've been expanding on electrical for a while, and we are doing a lot of work in structural and to train the users across the country. We've been doing a lot of online training as well. So some of our new training offerings, we're doing a lot of flex day programs for our larger clients. So you can get a discount if you purchase days that can be allocated after the fact to different students and training programs. We do a lot of online training, like we said. So a lot of advanced courses we're doing and very specific product-focused courses, we find that it can be more effective to run a more regular course online than it is in different cities. And also private training programs, of course. So we've been working with a lot of our clients to put together training programs specific for their engineering department. Just very briefly, what Aras PLM is, it's an extension of EPDM. So it probably doesn't make sense to look at it unless you've already been looking at already have EPDM in place, because it's about leveraging the bill of materials, doing change management, project management, all that stuff that EPDM just is you know, doesn't quite do. EPDM or enterprise PDM, the SolidWorks product, is really about you know, revision management, coordinating the team, that sort of idea. We did, or big news in the 3D printing market is that Stratasys purchased our main supplier Object, so that opened up the product line to have all of the Stratasys offering. So we have a printer, the Mojo is our entry-level printer, starts at about 10K. It's getting more and more affordable every day. And prints fantastic parts. So if you're interested in 3D printing, definitely check that out. And you know, last announcement is My SolidWorks. This is the place where existing SolidWorks clients should go if they want to gather information for or to check out forums or videos and stuff like that, instead of the SolidWorks website. So Javelin website is, of course, something to be aware of as well. But mysolidworks.com is a great portal for existing clients because the base website's more meant for prospects. So just before we move on to the main content of today, I'm going to do another poll question. So I'm curious about how experienced you are with SolidWorks. So we just wanted to get a sense of our audience. Have you been using it for quite a while, or are you newer to SolidWorks? Is there room for improvement, or have you done any certification? So it'd be great to fill that in. We'll leave that open for a couple more minutes here. Well, maybe seconds. Keep it going. All right, and as soon as we're done here, we're going to get rolling with the main content of the day, which is sketches and part design. So some of my favorite enhancements are in this section. Excited to go through them again with you today. All right, we'll close this up. So last minute votes, thanks very much. Perfect. All right, so with sketches and part design, let's start off with the sketching side. So just in the basic sketching side, there's some really nice stuff related to auto scaling. So if you remember, if you do multiple or do a sketch profile and you add that first dimension, that it tends to stretch and push and pull out of the screen if you're off by sizing. So that doesn't happen anymore. That first dimension auto scales, which is really nice. Different selection methods with lasso selection. And then the path length dimension allows you to drive a whole series of arcs and lines together with a dimension path. So great for belts and chains, wires and that sort of idea. So with that, I'm going to let Jake take it over and show some of that functionality.
All right. Good afternoon, everyone. So yeah, we're going to get right into some pretty awesome SolidWorks 2014 content. As Eric mentioned, the first thing today is actually just all about sketching. So this first enhancement is actually pretty cool. We call it the nothing feature. Eric and I, we've kind of dubbed it that. So basically, when you create a new part, generally you kind of sketch out the shape of the part that you want, and then you go and you add a dimension. But usually what would happen if you added a dimension, it would scale up that certain entity, and your sketch would kind of get really large and maybe blow up a little bit. So what they've done in 2013 is they've completely eliminated that, and when you place the first dimension in the sketch, SolidWorks will automatically scale the entire sketch to preserve the size and the position of all entities within that sketch. So basically you're not going to notice anything, but it's scaling the entire sketch for you. And furthermore, SolidWorks also will maintain your zoom and perspective to keep everything intact. So really your screen's not going to change at all. It'll just apply the dimension and scale everything else relative to it. So that's why we call it the nothing feature, because nothing happens, and that's a good thing. The next thing that they've done is they've actually added a new method of selection, selecting sketch entities called the lasso selection. So this is accessible through the right mouse button, and if you right click, you can toggle between lasso selection and box selection. So what this allows us to do is to select irregularly shaped objects, or to kind of move this selection around so we can select some objects and not the other ones. So it's a little more freeform, kind of like Photoshop or other programs that use this sort of selection method. So it's really nice that we're able to do this in SolidWorks now. So it also incorporates the left to right and right to left selection methods, the same as the box, whereas right to left would only select every entity which has been crossed over, and the other one would select everything. So it really makes it fast and easy. Again, I can select these two circles here in this belt drive system without actually selecting the belt around it. So it's nice to kind of pick and choose which entities we want to kind of scribble over with that. The next thing that they've done in 2014 is they've added a new dimension that we can actually take advantage of called the path length dimension. So this dimension you can apply to any sketch entities that are tangent to each other. Basically, it's going to add them all up and create a path length dimension. So in this case, this is a belt drive system. These circles represent gears, and maybe I want this belt to be a certain length, or I just want to know how long the belt is. So I can actually do that by adding a path length dimension and then typing in a certain value, in this case 26.5 inches, and it will scale the belt to be that that size. So it's a really neat way that they've done to add this new dimension style that we can take advantage of, and I think it's really going to help us out in our designs.
All right, so moving along, just a quick announcement on stick fonts. I've heard this request over the years. I'm happy to see they introduced just stick fonts, so you don't have to, it's very easy to follow with a CNC or engravers as opposed to the double thick font that you would use if you wanted to extrude it and anything like that. So OLF Simple Sans OC is the one to write down if that's important to you. And I believe there's others to be introduced in the future as well. There's just that's kind of the one to start off with. The sketch picture tool has had some significant improvements. So this is opening up the doors for customers to use sketch pictures or photographs in their designs in ways that, or in cases where they wouldn't have used it in the past. So you can now very easily insert them and use this utility to get the size scaled down to a known dimension and be able to manipulate it by rotating and snapping in place very easily. So let's see some of that in action, Jake.
All right, no problem. Actually added a new way to manipulate the sketch picture in 2014. And
On our monitoring screen anyhow. Perfect. Okay, why don't you continue? Sorry about that, guys. Let's continue right along.
Sure. So for the sketch picture, it's one of my favorite things to do if you have sort of a picture or an image of one of your devices. So what they've done now is they've basically added this blue bar for sketch picture. You can then just drag over to any sort of dimension that you already know. And as soon as you let go of the blue bar, it's going to ask you for the dimension that actually is. So you can drag it to one known dimension, type in the value, and it's going to scale your sketch picture to match that dimension. So it's really, really handy if somebody gives you a sketch and says, oh, this is a reference dimension, and you can basically scale it very easily, and also use that blue bar to rotate it and to spin it around and even make it horizontal. So just a lot easier to use the sketch picture in 2014. It comes with a little bit easier of a user interface, and it's intelligent to adapt the scaling that you need.
All right. So moving on to the user interface, there are some nice improvements to the look and feel of SolidWorks. They did rework some of the colors to account for color blindness. So we did some quick math and using common statistics, there's about 45,000 SolidWorks users who are colorblind. There's a new history folder, which is nice. So similar to the favorites folder, you can see the latest feature that you've done before. Save it as a copy and open it up at the same time, and some other options in there. In section view, you have selective sectioning now. So some really nice graphics capabilities that, that definitely helped out a lot. When you're working with the recent documents, it's nice as well. So you now can use that as if it's Windows Explorer. So you just go to recent documents and you can drag items right from there into your assembly. You drag them up to the top to open them. And it's just much easier to work with. So you know, overall, the user interface has some nice aspects that that you'll enjoy. So we're just going to get set up on the next section here on showing you some of the user interface, and then later on we'll go into some of the other SolidWorks sketch and modeling functionality.
All right, thank you, Eric. Yeah, so in SolidWorks, the user interface, they've really done some great improvements in 2014. The overall user interface itself, including the property manager, the command manager, task pane, just to name a few, they now feature a new clean and modern look. So the corners are going to be nice and square, not so much of that you know, bubbly sort of buttons. So nice and clean now. And in addition, as Eric mentioned, selection icons have been modified across the entire software. So they basically use a slightly different color scheme just for colorblind individuals to make out the differences, the icons a little bit easier. So that's nice that they've done that. As Eric said, that actually affects quite a few people. And also, when you're working on complex parts and mechanisms to create design variations, the same features are often used over and over. So the same boss or the same hole or whatnot. So what they've done in 2014 is SolidWorks has added a new history folder for us that basically records the last 10 or so features that we've actually modified. So this can be adjusted. By default it's 10, but basically the idea is that it's going to keep track of our most recently used features, holes and bosses and whatnot. So if we need to go back and reuse them or edit them or modify them, they'll always be there in the history folder. And unlike the favorites folder that we introduced last year in 2013, this history folder is automatic. So it'll automatically keep track of the last features that you edited, whereas the favorites folder you have to manually click and say add to favorites. So just kind of two different ways of storing features that you use often. Once you're happy with this, we can actually talk a little bit about saving, which they've done some nice improvements in 2014. You can now save your copy of your assembly or your parts and directly open it afterwards. So instead of just saving off a copy somewhere and then having to go find it, now you can actually save a copy and open at the exact same time. So that's really nice. If it's an assembly, you can also choose to include all the reference components or the sub-assemblies just to make that whole thing a lot easier now. So you don't necessarily have to use pack and go anymore in 2014. That is nice just with the saving and the save as copy. So back to the full assembly here. It's pretty easy to make the external covering transparent. We just had this programmed into a display state. And there's actually a new way that it shows transparencies in 2014 called order-independent transparency. And this new technique just provides a lot better results for shadows and for transparencies. It just looks a lot better in 2014 when you have multiple transparent objects over each other, the shadows bleed through and everything. So definitely you know, a lot nicer just to kind of see transparent items with this new software in 2014. What we can also do is, one of my favorite things to do to sort of interrogate my assembly is to do the section view, similar to this. And what they've done now in 2014 is they allow us to have a selective section view. So we can select the different parts we want to section, and the other pieces of the assembly will not be sectioned. So it's really nice to kind of have an onion skin so you can peel away the outside layer and really not cut through the entire assembly. So it does make for some really nice looking results, and it also works within large design review mode. So if you do have very large assemblies, you can do this section view into that as well. So just some really nice things in the user interface. They've done a lot of good work for us, and it's getting easier to use and more powerful all at the same time. So they're definitely heading in the right direction with this.
Perfect. So let's get back to sketching a little bit. The first thing I want to talk about on sketching is working with conics. So we talked a little bit about conics last year, and I'll give you a little bit of review in a moment. After the conics, but when you're dealing with conics within the sketching, it now automatically adds tangencies at the end. So this makes it really nice to, well, really with the way that you naturally work with them. There's a new fixed length spline which will help out a lot, which similar to the path length dimension, you can now do that on splines for fixed length. My favorite thing in this entire webinar personally is the new styles spline. So a brand new way of working with spline tools is going to be much easier to control these more fluid or organic shapes and get exactly what you're looking for. And then replace sketch entity is nice. If you ever have it where if you were to delete something and it causes errors downstream, if you replace it with something as opposed to deleting it, will likely end up fixing or preventing some of those errors. So let's see some of that in action.
All right, splines and conics. So yeah, so there's a lot of good stuff that they've done, and definitely pushing the envelope of conics, as Eric mentioned. So when you're creating consumer products, this is sort of a new age skateboard deck here. Oftentimes you use some of the more advanced sketching tools found in SolidWorks, such as splines, even conics, and that sort of thing. So we'll actually kind of examine how this skateboard deck was built. So the path of the sweep used in this is currently just a line and a couple arcs on the end. These are just normal arcs. So what we want to do is let's replace these with the new conic fillets. So we can just delete the arcs and put a new conic in there. And what you're going to notice is that the conic automatically goes tangent when you put it in. So this is a really nice, really time-saving feature that they just automatically put in. So as soon as you just click a conic and you insert it, it's automatically going to find all the tangencies for you to give you that nice smooth result. And this just removes a lot of steps from having to manually click and add those tangencies in ourselves. So all that we have to do after that, after we replace it, is we can just dimension the conics again with a row value or a radius value, and our sketch will basically update, and we'll now have this new conic, which just gives a lot smoother result in our sketch. So in the same method, you can actually replace other sketch features. So for instance, this line, this might be a good candidate for us to replace again with a new conic. So what you're going to notice in 2014 is there's a lot of ways that you can incorporate conics in your design that you might have used arcs or lines in the past. They're really easy to work with. Again, the tangency snaps automatically. So they're actually a little bit quicker to use than other methods such as lines or arcs that you might have used in the past. So all of the geometry of this part automatically gets updated, so you can replace lines and arcs with conics without having anything blow up on you. And the next thing that they've kind of done with this advanced sketching is called fixed length spline. So this skateboard deck is actually made out of a carbon fiber sheet, and it's sort of bent. So it might be really useful for us to tell SolidWorks what the length of this spline bend is, so we can know how we started or what length or size of carbon fiber we
Sorry, can you, we're having a couple technical difficulties. Can you type in the questions whether you can hear us, first of all, and also see the new style spline there with the 160 millimeter measurement at the bottom? Okay, it sounds like we're back. So sorry about that if you missed some stuff. There's a little bit of sketching in the style spline, but in a nutshell, what you're looking at here, this polygon around that spline is the new way of drawing it. So you have to select style spline as opposed to using the traditional method. Great new way to make sure you get consistent curvature. So we're not sure where the drop off was, and for time's sake, I think we're just going to keep going. So apologize about that, and why don't you just keep going from here, Jake? And
absolutely, and it is good to note that we are actually recording this webinar, so if you do want a link to it later on, we can definitely send it out if you did miss any pieces. So just let us know, and we can send you the link to that. So overall, the style spline is just a little nicer way, and again, you can use the replace sketch entity to go and actually replace one sketch with another, and it will reestablish all of the links, and everything will be fine. So definitely look for those in your sketching in 2014.
All right. So, so just briefly on Conics, I just wanted to highlight a couple things about the benefits of working with Conics. So, so just for those of you who are unfamiliar, they were introduced last year, and essentially it's a curve that's part of a cone, right? So we see a cone there, and you can have any variation of shapes from circles to ellipses, parabolas. It's all those variations depending on the angle. It is very, fairly simple math for SolidWorks to compute, so that performance can be quite good on those. Probably one of the bigger advantages is that they are C2 continuous. So if you were just to do a round on the end, like for a fillet, for instance, it's usually just C1 for the most part. So, so C2 continuous can make much smoother blends. You can adjust the sharpness, which is nice. And if you're using it for sweeps, making sure that there's no inflections can ensure that you have better reliability on that sort of idea. So we can adjust that by the row value. Now we did want to talk, we don't have time to show too much on this within SolidWorks. We're trying to squeeze in a lot of content in this hour. But we did want to very briefly talk about the Conic Fillets. So on top of them using them in the sketching side, you can now use conics for the fillet side instead of rounds. So you now can assign the row value or adjust the radius, which is just the internal kind of pointiness radius, as if you're going to put a circle right in that point. You can also adjust it with a variable fillet, so you can do a variable conic fillet. And also when you're working with a face fillet, it's more of a terminology change, but we are referring now to the chord width as opposed to, I think it was just width before, or forget, in all honesty, I forget the terminology before, but it's now chord width to when you're doing a face fillet to say what the blend is between there. Just before we pop into sheet metal, I do want to do another poll question. So we are curious about the roles that our customers have out there. So this is more, this is specific to you. We're curious whether you do mechanical design, whether you do some electrical design as well, whether you're a team leader or manager, whether you create technical documentation, or whether you help with the CAD administration. So you can actually select multiple answers here. Definitely, I think it's quite common for customers to have a minimum 2 of these roles. I've had customers where we talk with and they have all 5 of those roles. So, trying to juggle it all. But if you can kind of check off the ones that apply to you, would be good, just to help understand your role at the company. Would be great. All right, and most people have voted here, so I'm going to close it off. Final votes in. Perfect. Okay. Awesome. Thanks for participating. So just going along here, we wanted to talk, shift gears a little bit away from sketching and detailed part design, and we're going to talk about, we're going to go into sheet metal and weldment functionality. So first off, we're going to talk about sheet metal. There are some enhancements related to doing swept flanges. So swept flanges, if you recall, we're making those shapes which are, really formed shapes as opposed to made with bent sheet metal, but it is nice to be able to flatten them very easily. So, there isn't, they won't be 100% accurate because there is obviously material flow happening, but there is some enhancements when you're working with those complex cylindrical and conical shapes. there is a really nice feature in sheet metal for gussets, so you can now dent in a corner as if, so it's more of like a post-bending procedure, just adding rigidity to your bend, so you can now model that up very easily. Brand new way of working with corner relief as well, so just getting that flat pattern accurate based on how you want to relieve the corners. You can select that all in another 3D space, so really nice functionality to work with. And then working with lofted transitions, brand new options to work that way, so you can now control it with chord tolerance, number of bends, segment length, and segment angle. And the really nice thing is that you see the actual bent up shape, so with all your flat ridges or flat areas, and a very nice way of working with lofted sheet metal parts, which make the flat patterns much more accurate than they were before.
That's right. Some really good enhancements in sheet metal for 2014. So swept flanges, as shown here, they were introduced in 2012 for SolidWorks, and they're a pretty powerful sheet metal design tool. However, in certain circumstances, in previous versions of SolidWorks, when you would unfold it would actually unfold about the wrong edge, so as shown here. So in 2014, there's a new option within the swept flange feature to allow you to control basically how this unfolds, which edge you want to lock so it unfolds the proper way, again in the forming method when it unbends it. So that is nice to have explicit control over that. And also for sheet metal, a new gusset feature for sheet metal gussets. It was actually a pretty highly requested feature in the community of SolidWorks. A lot of people were interested in having this. So SolidWorks did listen, and they gave this to us. So just like a Weldment gusset, there's a lot of variety of options to control the geometry, such as the indented depth or a specific dimension for the length of the sides. And you can even define if it has a flat or a full round top. There's a lot of control over there. You can basically set up how you want your gusset in your sheet metal. And likewise, you can also specify the internal radii, and SolidWorks will automatically offset it to the material thickness. So it can kind of be intelligent there as well. And also a little subtle in 2014, but new and actually very powerful. SolidWorks 2014 will actually remember the property manager values when you're creating additional features. So for instance, if I go and I add one more sheet metal gusset, it's actually going to remember all the property manager values I used last time and automatically plug those in. So it makes adding additional features very quick. And this is across the board in SolidWorks, not just with the sheet metal gusset. Also, a new in corner reliefs for sheet metal. You now have explicit control how to define and redefine each corner and how it gets its relief type in the sheet metal. So you can quickly gather all the corners with a single button, and it'll put this little orange circle over each corner, and you can specify individually to control each corner simply by selecting on that circle, or you can choose all of them together. And as Eric mentioned, there's actually 5 different unique relief types that you can choose from. So these are rectangular, circular, tier, oblong, and just a constant width. So there's a lot of new ways you can control the corner reliefs and individually. So I think that's really neat. They're giving us more control there. A little bit of work has been done also in lofted bends. So this is another scenario that that affects pretty greatly manufacturing process, is when you do a lofted bend sheet metal part. So although SolidWorks has always had the ability to create these formed methods, in 2014 it now provides us an option to show these features as a bend or a transitional state. So if you have multiple bends to achieve that. So we'll look at that. So just like corner reliefs, there's a lot of options here when we see the lofted bends. And these options include a chord tolerance, a number of bends, a segment length, and a segment angle. So these are all just different methods on how we can bend up this lofted sheet metal part. In this case, we'll choose number of bends. So I can tell it, make me this lofted sheet metal part, and use 8 bends or 20 bends or however many to do it. So once you specify it, again, you can control how it works and, of course, flatten it. And it will form that lofted sheet metal part with a specified number of bends that you asked it to. This is a really nice way to actually get more, machinable friendly ways of creating these sheet metal parts, and it's just a little bit more control on your end on how you want these to turn out.
All right, quick poll question for you guys, just related to electrical design. As I'm sure you guys are well aware that we've been working with electrical design for the last few years. It's really is our fastest growing market segment. So we are always constantly interested on what sort of electrical design our customers do up there. So do you have some sort of control panel? Cable lay is obviously an important part. You do harness design. You do is there electronics or PCB in there, or do you not have any electrical design? So it's just important for us to kind of help tailor the messaging and the information that you get as best we can. So if you could kind of give us some of that feedback, would be great. So hold it open for another couple seconds here. Okay, and you can click obviously multiples as well, so you don't have to just select one by any means. All right, perfect. Well, thanks very much for voting. I'll close it up. Okay, so back to part design, weldments and part enhancements. So so there's a couple things we're slotting in here that are beyond the weldments, but we're grouping them together. First off is improved edge hiding. So if you ever have it where you're with thin sheet metal parts on top of welded frames, is like a typical example, but where you have edges bleeding through in the graphics area, they've managed to kind of improve that to hide them. So much easier to take screenshots. Configurable weldment profiles. So this is one of the more significant things to the weldment side. So you don't need all this as deep a folder structure and the number of library feature parts to drive those weldment profiles. You can actually move the weldment profiles up one folder, and instead of all those different files, put them all in configurations of that file. So much easier to control that way. Very nice to use. Talked about configurable equations, which is nice too. So this is a good example of something that's relevant for all part design. It's not just in weldments, but you can now have an equation which is only applied to a certain configuration. In the past, it was if you applied an equation, it was globally applied to all configurations. Slots is a brand new area, so it's I love how it's an extension of Hole Wizard. So you just use the same Hole Wizard you did before, but now instead of just a straight hole, you can drill a slot or machine a slot. Quick way to do through all in both directions as well, which is nice. Moving along with still some of parts and some weldments, it's really easy to retain the children of deleted features now, so you now have this option to select which ones you're working with. You can control the normal plane direction, so this helps with what that direction 1 is and direction 2 if you're using planes. Some updates on reference points, which is nice, so being able to draw reference points of intersection of geometry, which wasn't possible before. Volume units added now, liters, ounces, and gallons, so very practical, making it easy for customers to work in those units that was challenging before. And also exporting, this is again with weldment parts, exporting out as a cut list and getting all those properties linked. There's some improvements there, making it much easier to leverage weldments, even if you need a series of parts inside of an assembly as an end result.
All right, so as Eric mentioned, a lot of really good stuff in weldments and part design. The first off, which I really like and I noticed right away, is the edge bleed through for thin features. So basically, if you zoom out, and you probably noticed this in previous versions of SolidWorks, if you have a very thin part and it's laying on top of another one, you'll sort of get this this bleed through or this sketching almost that looks like on top of the part. And it's because the very thin part, actually the polygons get so small that it actually shows the polygons underneath it. So they basically taken care of that in 2014. You'll still see the bleed through while you're rotating the model, but as soon as you let go and you stop rotating it, it'll clean it all up and you won't have to worry about any of that bleed through anymore. So it's a lot nicer, again, to take screen captures of and just kind of cleans up the whole look of your model. So as Eric mentioned, configurable weldment profiles. So when you're working with weldments, managing all the profiles provided by SolidWorks and those created by other users, it can often be almost overwhelming when you get so many in there. So in this case, I've downloaded just all of the ANSI profiles, and there's 233 separate files to manage. So with all the different profiles in there. So there's just a lot of different files because each profile has its own part file in SolidWorks. So what happens if you got a new supplier of steel and the radius changed a little bit on all these profiles? Well, you'd have to open up 233 different files and change the radius. So it could be you know, very time consuming. So what SolidWorks has done is they've completely streamlined this in 2014 with the introduction of configurable weldment profiles. So now each profile can be a configuration inside of a single part. So if we open up one of these parts here, I can actually show you what I mean by that. So for instance, this square or rectangle tube, it could really be both because they're configurations. There's just a lot of different configurations underneath it. But again, since they are configurations within a single part, I can change the radius, and all of the radiuses for every single profile are going to change and update automatically. So it just makes managing it a lot easier. And of course, you can also use a design table to manage or create these configurations. And Eric, I put you on the spot here. I heard you telling someone a pretty interesting story about using these design tables recently.
Yeah, well, one thing that I was always frustrated with SolidWorks when I typically use it on my home reno projects, I'm sure there's a lot of you out there that use it for the same thing. I was frustrated there was no wood profiles. So I was, you know, in the past I would go and create the couple that I needed, obviously a 2x4 and things like that. But just to try out this new 2014 functionality, what I did was take a table from, I think I got it from Wikipedia, and I copied and pasted it into this Excel sheet to get all the different descriptors and measurements of actual wood profiles accurately dictated. So it's pretty, you know, that would have taken me, you know, quite a while to do if I had to do all the individual files. But this way I got a complete library of the wood profiles in a matter of minutes. So, you know, great way to leverage that functionality.
That's true. That's a good way to do it. So definitely a lot nicer, you know, having a single part file in multiple configurations within it. So back in the Weldment, you can see that the property manager, it hasn't changed at all for the configurable Weldment profiles. And actually you can have a combination of single part Weldment profiles and configuration-based Weldment profiles. So you can still use your previous libraries if you're not going to get rid of those, but maybe all the parts in the future or all the profiles in the future you can use configurations for just to speed it up a little bit. So you're not going to lose any functionality, but it's going to make it easier. And also, because all of these profiles are created not just from the same parts, but from the same sketch, you can very easily replace one profile with the next. So all the holes that go through it or any trimming that you did, that's all going to get updated very easily if you swap out the profiles because it's the exact same part file, just a different configuration. So it's going to be a lot easier to manage from multiple aspects. And as Eric mentioned, we now have configurable equations in 2014. So basically you can choose what configuration your equations are going to apply to. So for instance, an easy way to change this design would be to simply enter the same value as the depth of the table for the width. But a more powerful way is to add an equation, and then we can link it to a configuration. So once we add the equation, we can say pull up this equation when this configuration is active. So you can see that the dimensions now, they have the equation symbol next to it. And if you go to the equation manager, you can see the equations listed. But when you switch configurations, those equations will actually go away. So they're not going to be visible or calculated anymore. So you could use this for a lot of number of different ways to speed up your design or to just to only activate equations on a certain configuration activation. So very nice way to do it. Another new feature that's very powerful are slots in the hole wizard. So when you're adding holes for fasteners, oftentimes, you know, they might not line up. And if you're like me, you just say, well, put a slot in there and we'll let the assembler figure it out. So now in 2014 of SolidWorks, the hole wizard actually supports this. So specifically, it supports 3 different types of slots. So it has countersunk, counter bore slots, and just regular straight slots. So basically, you can add slots in instead of holes in the hole wizard, or change your holes to slots now. And it basically just adds in a construction line. So it's not an actual slot sketch with tangents and arcs. It's just a construction line, but it then slots through that. So you can put an angle in there against the construction line. You can dimension it. You can make it horizontal or vertical. And it'll basically just plow a slot right through that, again, using the counter bore, counter sunk, or whatever type of a slot you actually chose. So a very powerful way to use slots in your design using the hole wizard. And this is a neat one. We can now do through all in both directions. So if you want to just kind of plow through everything in both directions, left and right, or direction 1 and direction 2, you can now simply tell it to go through all in both directions, and whatever profile you're looking at will just blow a hole in both directions. Also, you can have more control in 2014 of retaining the children of deleted features. So previously, you could choose either to keep all the children of a deleted feature or to delete all the children. And now we have specific control over which children we want to delete and which ones we actually want to keep. So a little more control over that aspect as well. And also the reference plane, we can now control specifically the normal direction of the plane itself. So we have a new flip normal button here, which can be used to achieve some really nice results. Again, to get rid of some errors if we do want to replace this or reuse some of the same sketches. Setting that normal direction to be the way that we want it will really speed up our process and eliminate errors down the road. And of course, dictate which way normal is when we actually go normal to that plane. So we now have control of that in 2014. Also, reference point enhancements have been made in 2014. So we now have the ability to put reference points on other sketch points or endpoints of lines, etc. So it's a lot easier to place these. You can use more entities to find the intersection. And also for axis, you can use the intersection of an axis and a surface, or an axis and a plane, to actually create a reference point where they meet. So that's a very powerful way to kind of see, the intersection of a virtual axis or a radius or whatnot, and create a nice little reference point there to mark its location. Also, as Eric mentioned, traditional volumetric properties have been added just to give us a little bit better idea of the volume. So these include pints and gallons and liters. So you can now display volume in a little bit easier to understand unit system, because nobody wants to know how many cubic centimeters a bottle is going to hold. They want to know how many gallons or how many liters it's going to hold. So now we can display it in this new volume method. And lastly, saving cutlass properties to parts has been a really great enhancement. So basically, these cutlass properties, they're often very critical for the manufacture of specific parts, maybe of these feet or of different weldment profiles pieces. So now we can actually export these cutlass properties and put them into the file itself. So if we export that file as a separate part so that we can create a new drawing off of it, all of these cutlass properties are actually going to follow along. So we're not going to lose any intelligence. It's fully parametrically connected still to the parent, but we can have access to them in this child part. So if we make a drawing of it, we can then call out all of these properties, and we're not going to lose any intelligence at all by saving this part as a separate piece.
Okay. Actually, can you go back to the agenda for the week? Maybe that for slide of other webinars?
Absolutely.
I was thinking that would be a good one to kind of end off on. So that concludes the webinar for today. I just have a quick poll question for you, just to finish off the webinar. I'm just curious whether you thought it was a good use of time, and obviously giving us some feedback to to see if we should continue putting effort to kind of put on these sort of stuff for our clients. So that would be great. And when we close that up, finish that up. I just also wanted to remind you of some of the other webinars we have going on this week. So tomorrow, November 6th, the same time, we have a What's New with Core SolidWorks Functionality, Assemblies, and Drawings. On Thursday, November 7th, we have What's New with SolidWorks Solution. So that's including some of the add-on products. We also have some like photo rendering in there as well. So some of those, it's like today and tomorrow we really tried to focus on what's in the base level of SolidWorks. So we didn't even include add-ons with SolidWorks Professional for the most part. And then on Friday we actually have a different team. We have our electrical team here at Javelin presenting the SolidWorks Electrical. So Jake and I aren't doing it this time. We've been doing it at the Rollout live events, but we're yeah, we'll close it out. But we have we do have a team designated towards electrical design, so we'll have them take that over. So they're actually going to do you know, fairly in-depth overview of SolidWorks Electrical, what's new. They're going to include a few things that just on the workflow, just so everybody's aware of how the functionality works, and along the way highlight all the new things that are with SolidWorks Electrical. So a little bit of a different format that I thought would be great. So with that, we're going to wrap it up. Really appreciate you guys taking some time out of your busy schedules to spend with us and learn a little bit about SolidWorks. Hopefully it was a good use of your time, and we look forward to working with you throughout the remainder of this year and into next on your next priorities. So hopefully you'll attend the next ones as well, and if we don't speak with you, you know, good luck to finish off the year strong.